I'm just finding it hard to believe that of all the teams in my division, I'm the one that ended up with the worst draft grade. I mean, doesn't this teacher know who I am? Oh, I think he knows. I just don't think he cares, and honestly, why should he? Ah, well, someone's still salty over the 2 Super Bowl wins we had over them in the 80s, I see. Ooh, that's kind of a cringy flex. I mean, that was a long time ago, and half the people watching this probably weren't even alive back then. Now, what about the half that was alive and watched those games? They probably remember what a pathetic performance you put on display, no? Oh, pathetic performance. That's pretty funny. Those games were close, genius. We could have easily won either of them. But you didn't win either of them, did you? Shut up, Pittsburgh. I just realized, Cincinnati, you're 0-3 against our division in Super Bowls. That's pretty interesting, huh? That is pretty interesting. I have a question. Shouldn't you be more focused on who you're going to trade Aaron Donald to when you start the season 0-6? What? Well, we'll take him. I'm beginning to hate this reality. Not to brag, but we did take Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft, and he is starting over 2 quarterbacks that were taken in the top 3 of their respective drafts. I mean, that should say something about our judgment. Okay, so you're not going to mention the fact that you traded a bunch of draft capital to take one of those quarterbacks. That's a good point, and that should cancel out any praise that you might get for drafting Purdy. You gave up a bunch of draft picks to trade for Captain Turnover, Matthew Stafford. What the hell are you talking about? We won a Super Bowl with Stafford. Los Angeles, refresh my memory. What team did you beat in that Super Bowl again? I thought I told you to shut up, Pittsburgh. I'm just saying, we have a history of drafting exquisitely. Therefore, all of our future draft picks should be graded on a curve. Yeah, you got that right. And what are we finding funny over there? Kyler just said you're one of those teams that you think would win a Super Bowl in the modern era, but probably won't. I am paying attention to the game, Kyler. I was just answering the man's question. I can do more than one thing at once, you know. Speaking of which, have you studied your playbook yet, by the way? You know, speaking of drafting well, you want to know who drafts well? Pete Carroll. Obviously not well enough to beat us in the playoffs, though. Hey, if that game would have ended at halftime, we would have won in historic fashion. San Francisco, do you realize if you took all 3 of your quarterbacks and had them drive vehicles that they can combine together to form a giant robot that can play quarterback, that would solve all your quarterback injury problems? Vehicles that connect to form a giant robot. You stole that idea from the Power Rangers, didn't you? Any fool would know they stole it from Voltron first. You might not know this, but there's actually a league rule against doing things like that, you know? I never heard of that. How do you know that? Well, Sean McVay suspected Tom Brady may not have been human when the Patriots beat us in the Super Bowl that year, so he asked the league to draft a rule prohibiting the use of cyborgs or mechanical persons, as he stated it in his letter, and they secretly did. The league also frowns upon those who attempt to conjure demonic forces in season. Not that I would know anything about that. So robots are prohibited, but demons are a gray area. Sounds like something the NFL might do. What about voodoo? Is there any rule that prohibits the use of voodoo during a game? Not to my knowledge. Good to know. What if I find an Necronomicon? Am I allowed to use that to summon some of those Evil Dead demons to help us win games? New England already said demons are frowned upon. I'm pretty sure that would extend to Evil Dead demons. And where would you find a Necronomicon anyway? Well, Cleveland is built on a Hellmouth, so I figure there's a pretty solid chance it might be lying around somewhere. Okay, and how do you know Cleveland's built on a Hellmouth? Giles confirmed it in the last episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The Cleveland Hellmouth is the reason Lord Belichick decided to rule over that team for a time. And you're telling me he couldn't figure out how to use his power to, I don't know, maybe help us win some Super Bowls? He found Hellmouths to be fickle and discovered the forces in the Lovecraft region of the country are far more cooperative. That could explain why Cleveland's been so utterly and laughably atrocious for so many years. You know, we've been equally atrocious for a very long time. You think East Rutherford is built on a Hellmouth? No. Hey, San Francisco, Kyler says try not to get dizzy on that quarterback carousel of yours this season. Arizona, every quarterback on our roster plays with heart, unlike some other quarterback I know who has done nothing since coming into this league but stand around with his in his hands. Hey, come on, leave the Sean out of this.